everyone. Welcome to Turned Out a Punk. Today on the show, one of my favorite musicians of all time, one of Canada's greatest songwriters. You may know him from the band The Pursuit of Happiness, or you may know him from Modern Minds, or you may even know him from Face Crime, or you may just be learning about his work today. Moe Berg is on the show. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and this is Turned Out a Punk. This is a conversation I've wanted to have for years, like forever. I've met Moe a few times as the years have gone by in different places. We are both fixtures of the city of Toronto, so I'd see him ever since I was like a little kid walking around. But thanks to our mutual good friend and Moe's bandmate, Chris Murphy, this conversation now has finally happened. Chris Murphy and Moe, of course, play along with Craig from The Odds and Stephen, formerly of Bare Naked Ladies, Stephen Page, a friend of the show, Stephen Page too, in the unbelievably cool, fun supergroup Trans-Canada Highwaymen. This is the music I grew up on. These guys are all performing and doing each other's songs. They don't have any shows lined up right now that I can see, but if they do have shows coming up, you should definitely go and see them play because, yeah, as I say, these are like some of the greatest songs ever. This is the Canadian songbook from the 90s that these guys kind of collectively ended up having a huge part in writing. Moe also plays still in The Pursuit of Happiness, and hopefully you can see them play if they've got any shows coming up. And there will be links to Moe and all these projects down below, so you can kind of keep abreast. And also Moe's first punk band, the Modern Minds. If you have never heard this band, one of the I'm saying one of the greatest a lot here, but definitely one of the real top kind of Canadian melodic punk records of all time. One of the top Canadian punk records of all time. It has been reissued along with some other stuff from radio sessions by Ugly Pop Records here in Toronto. I believe the vinyl might be out of print. Maybe you can still find a copy of that thing floating around. Check out all of Moe's stuff. As I said off the top, one of the great songwriters to ever come out of this place, and someone who has been inspiring me since I was like, my first memories are of seeing his band's videos on Much Music. Like those are some of my first music memories that I can. Madness 45s and Pursuit of Happiness on Much Music. I'm not going to ramble on anymore because I could ramble on forever about Moe, but you're going to hear me ramble a little bit in this episode. So I'm going to let you sit back, relax, and enjoy the great Moe Berg on Turned Out a Punk. Moe, thank you for coming over.
Oh, great to be here.
Well, this for me is a huge episode because I feel like you're my local hero. Like growing up, seeing you on Queen Street, and you're like one of those guys that once you moved to Toronto, like you've never, maybe you did for a brief period, but you never left.
No, I never did.
So you're like, just to me, like, I don't know, it's just a big deal to get to finally talk to you for this podcast because I feel like I kind of grew up with you in a way.
Awesome.
Or grew up around you, I should say.
Yeah.
I could start this off a million places, but I guess the best place to start off is the way it always starts off, which is, Moe, how'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I was a kid. I liked the radio, and I loved the Beatles and the Beach Boys and the Who, and then, you know, as I got older, this story has been told many times on this podcast, got into like Lou Reed and the New York Dolls and Iggy Pop. Like when I was in high school, that was kind of like, I was read Cream magazine every month, and so whatever they told me was cool. So I got into all those bands. I was really into all of them, and then really into Quadrophenia by the Who and all this sort of disaffected youth kind of music, and it less so the sort of British like David Bowie or Mott the Hoople and that, and I sort of feel bad because just the town I grew up in, it was called St. Albert, Alberta. It's like a suburb of Edmonton. And there's like 12,500 people. There's, it was literally a bedroom community, and so some music just didn't make it to there. So I kind of feel bad that I never got to experience that until much later. The only sort of glammy sort of band that I got into was Slade. And I thought Slade were amazing. And it was largely because when I was so in St. Albert there was like a sort of split into like Protestant and Catholic. It was super weird.
Mm.
And then and so but at a, and then there was also like two Protestant junior high schools and elementary schools, and then there's one Protestant high school. So when we got to high school, we sort of met all these new people, and I was like, hey, these people are exotic and interesting, but they were listening to like, you know, Transformer by Lou Reed, and they had Slade. Slade is this insane album, and so I got into Slade. But yeah, so those are the bands, you know, that a lot of those are the same entry bands that many people.
Proto punk.
Yeah, yeah, and so then, I mean, you know, I just remember. So I had these three friends that you know, Kevin, Jackson, and Rod, and we were kind of like hung out all the time and listened to music, and we were all really, really into music. And Jackson ordered Pretty Vacant. So this was before Nevermind the Bollocks came out. So that's how old I am, folks. And so anyway, so he ordered it, and we got it, and we all went over to Kevin's house to listen to it, and he put it on, and it was a 7-inch, and we started listening to it, and it was it blew our minds in a way that very few songs that I've heard since have. And I just remember like how excited we were listening to it, and it really gave me so I think every generation has their music. And so I feel like a lot of the music that I had been listening to up to that point was like other people's music, like my brothers and sisters or older people, like people who in Cream magazine and stuff. But this was like the music of my generation. And so that was like a kind of a very transformative moment for me, was hearing that, you know.
I find it really interesting though, because like you said, like, you know, this is the proto-punk stuff that people were discovering, but in Canada, it wasn't like we really had, like, Cream magazine, I guess, would have been the entry point. Like, where were you hearing about some of these bands? Because they were obscure.
Yeah, largely in Cream magazine. Okay. So there was, you know, there was nothing in Edmonton that would have led me to Iggy Pop or Lou Reed or the New York Dolls. You know, that was purely Cream magazine that got me there.
It's fascinating because, like, from you guys on, like, Edmonton to me has always been like a hotbed of underground music in Canada. But was there any sort of like Ugly Ducklings-esque stuff prior to you guys, or like Teenage Head, like you know, like a kind of a bridge between the proto-punk and the punk era? Was there anything like that?
Well, so just to give you some background, so Edmonton was like kind of the worst place in the world to be a musician when I was a kid, because there was no such thing as a nightclub. So there wasn't a club where you could just go play music. So if you wanted to play live music or see live music, the only place you could do that and get a drink at the same time was at a hotel bar. So all the hotel bars basically controlled all the live music, and so they hired cover bands for the most part. And so it was it was insane. It was very, very hard to get a gig if you were playing your own music or playing. So there was a band called The Nerve, and The Nerve was this guy PJ Burton, who went on to do a bunch of stuff afterwards, and so I had a band with two guys from my high school. They were a little younger than me, which was Kim Upright on drums and Bob Drysdale on bass, who would eventually be the Modern Minds. But we had a band, and we had just like a cover band, because that's all we really knew. Like in Edmonton, you started a cover band if you wanted to play any shows at all. So we play high schools and stuff like that. And so at a certain point, I ended up leaving that band. I joined a band with a bunch of older guys, and same thing, covers terrible stuff. And then we went to, but Kim went to play with The Nerve. And so we ended up doing this. There was a biker gang out in Edmonton, and our bass player of the band I was in, the older guys, he used to sell drugs to them.
What was the gang? Is it like a gang, like a well-known gang? Or
yeah, they were called the Rebels or something like that. Yeah, yeah. So it was
Wow.
that was the gang. It was the bike gang in Edmonton. So we ended up playing a picnic of theirs, like a picnic. And they had a biker picnic, and I was like the straightest kid in the world. I was like, never did drugs, didn't drink, a virgin, everything. Like, you know, like the straightest kid in the world. I just thought this whole thing was, the fact that I was in a band with a guy who sold drugs to a biker gang was just like, this is super bizarre.
Well, there's also, just before we get to the story, because how do you sell drugs to the biker gang?
Well, yeah, I don't know. And, you know, and then I don't know how long that lasted. It was, I don't know, maybe he was just like a conduit to them. I don't know how much of a whatever he was. But anyway, that's what it seemed like. And and so anyway, so we played, and the Nerve played, and like completely inappropriate music for this thing. But they played, he was kind of like an Alice Cooper meets Johnny Rotten kind of guy. So, they played a bunch of covers, and they played like some Sex Pistols songs, and they played some Iggy Pop songs, and I think he kind of fashioned himself after Iggy. And our drummer was in the band. That's why I'm bringing that up. And so I saw that, and I was like, kind of like, this is really what I want to do. I want to do this kind of thing, because I've been listening to that music. I was listening to it, but I just hadn't like got to be playing it. And so me and Kim got back together, and Bob, and that's when we started. We were first called the News, and then we found out about Huey Lewis News, and that's when we changed our band to them. But the reason I'm saying all this is because it was impossible to get a gig. And so, like, when you say, was there anything before that? No, there wasn't. There was nothing, because you were in a cover band that played like Bad Company and to the Doobie Brothers, yeah. Or you didn't, and so the Modern Minds, or I guess the News at the time, our first gig was in a discotheque.
And with the light up floor and everything?
What's that?
With the light up floor and everything?
Yeah, like it was like a disco, and I guess someone had booked it and said, well, I'm going to do a punk show here. And so we played, and this band called Legal Limit played, not the Legal Limit from the South. And it was George Wall, who went on to be pretty big. He was in the Jerry and the Sons of Rhythm Orchestra, and he was in
Rock and Roll Bitches.
Rock and Roll Bitches.
Rest in peace, yeah.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately passed away a while ago. And so it was us and them. And they also had this guy named Dale Weiss in the band, who ended up being kind of a big in the record store community in Vancouver. And so that was the very first show. And so I'm like, I go to this show, and we go to play, and it's like, who are all these people? Where have they been? Like, what is going on? Because they were just like, it was almost like, a pack of dogs, and someone threw a steak out there. All of a sudden, these people, everybody just went and gravitated. So this thing was packed. The first show I ever did was just packed with all these people who had never got a chance to see this music before.
It's so funny, because that's something that definitely comes up on the show, that there's almost like a longing for this to happen, mm-hmm. from people. And there's like, obviously all you guys that made up the first sorts of waves in your cities, it was like, there was percolations, I guess, because there is this sort of proto-punk stuff, but it just feels like, like you go to a show and be like, oh my God, all the kids I've wanted to meet my whole life are here. Mm. And we're all just hanging out, and stuff. So, that's awesome. That's great. So you mentioned the Jerry, what is it? The Jerry Rhythm Orchestra.
The Sons of Rhythm Orchestra, yeah.
Sons of Rhythm Orchestra. It's crazy, the lineup on that first LP on OG. Like, it's like a who's who of people that would go on into different bands. People from the Asexuals, Malibu Kens. Like, was that... And you play on it, too? Like, was that like an early sort of supergroup that kind of united the scene a little bit? Or?
Well, yeah. So Jerry was just kind of a guy on the scene, like when we first started. And so he wasn't really doing anything musically, but he was just kind of there. He was always sort of there. And I, we would do things like jam. Me and George Wall and him would jam like rockabilly songs. We never played any shows, but we, played like rockabilly stuff or whatever. And he was kind of the singer, and that was kind of his entry into it. And then I think that's what kind of helped shape him into what he would end up becoming. But yeah, I mean, when you say, there was no proto-punk at all. Like, there was no bands that were playing, David Bowie covers or Iggy Pop covers. It was just like nothing. And then like The Nerve and us and Legal Limit, and then, obviously a bunch of bands after that.
The Nerve did a single too, right? I don't think it has a sleeve.
Yeah, it was called Penchant. Yeah. Yes. And so, they did a single. So it's actually a pretty not terrible song. It's
killer.
Yeah.
I love, that's the thing. It's like all that first crop of bands that comes out, all you guys are awesome. Like the Rock and Roll Bitches, the Modern Mind single, the Malibu Ken single, but it's nowhere like a uniform sound. And I guess that's true about that sort of first wave of bands. It's like everyone's kind of coming to this. No one has like the rules.
Yeah. I feel like punk sort of, it's kind of like, disco or hip hop or any other music form. There's sort of like a figuring out period. Mm-hmm. And I think when punk sort of went hardcore, that was when it was like, there's a punk sound now. Like there's a sound, and a lot of bands sound like that. Whereas before it was like exactly what you said. It was kind of it was more of an idea or an attitude than it was an actual sound, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel that's like when it's most interesting is because you're getting so many cool people that would go on and do other things, disparate things, kind of coming out of this moment.
Right.
What was the first punk record from there? Who was the first person to put out a record?
So I guess technically the Nerve
Okay,
put
they're
a punk
first
on
before you
that.
guys
Yeah.
because you guys are Bumber. Was it Bumberstead one?
Yeah,
Bumstead one.
yeah, yeah. So I would probably say we were the second band.
Okay.
Someone could, overrule me on that, but I'm pretty sure we were the second band from Edmonton that put out a record.
So from that initial explosion till the time the record comes out, was there sort of like a constant like stream of these kids coming to the shows, or did it kind of like waver as the initial hype dies down?
No, the Modern Minds was like I think people who even kind of like weren't sure if they even liked us still came to the shows because there was nothing else to do. There was nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, our shows were typically pretty busy. And so which was great because like I said, there just wasn't much of it around. Bands started up after that. The Diefenbakers and other bands like that started. There was a whole bunch of them, but yeah, there just wasn't much of it around. And the other thing is because there wasn't a lot of gigs. There was a bar called the Corona Tavern downtown Edmonton, and like they'd on a Tuesday night they'd slum it and they'd have a punk show, and it was kind of a dangerous little bar, but they all were like the Calgarian and all these places, and so that would be a gig for you, or someone would rent a hall, and then you'd play at the hall, and it would be like an unlicensed gig, and you just play there.
Yeah, because I imagine the hotels were always resistant to this kind of music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they would think, well, nothing's happening tonight, so we'll do it, and maybe they'll bring in all the people like that, and that will be enough beer sales besides all the alcoholics to sort of float their boat that night.
You might push back on me in this, but I feel like you guys, out of all those bands, has the most commercial upside to the type of music you guys are playing. Like,
Right.
it seems a lot more melodic and power pop informed.
Yes, I wouldn't push back at you at all on that. And that was because that's sort of where I came from. I came from that world of sort of very melodic music. Like, like I said, the Beatles, the Beach Boys. I liked the Raspberries and Badfinger and all the sort of like second wave of power pop. That was all the music I liked. So when when I heard the original punk records, I didn't get a sense that it was all that different. It was just kind of more aggressive because all those bands were also like, even the Sex, I wouldn't say the Sex Pistols necessarily, but certainly the Jam, the band that we probably fashioned ourselves after the most would have been like a band like the Buzzcocks, which was also very melodic poppy kind of band, and then the Jam was also very melodic, and even the Clash. So I felt like that wasn't like a wild stretch from where I was coming from.
No, it's one of my favorite records ever to come out of Canada, that single. And I think, was there ever an opportunity for you guys to kind of cross over more to playing sort of like more mainstreamy type hotel situations, or were you lumped in with? Because the Rock and Roll Bitches name is so adversarial, and there's such a harshness to that. Whereas I think you guys could conceivably like fit in, especially in a post Nat kind of environment.
Right. Well, when we were, yes. So eventually we got to the point where, and the scene got a little bigger too. Like it stopped being so dramatically weird. And so I think there was that place, the Corona Tavern, that we could play at. And we may have gotten a gig. We got a gig, I think, at this place called the Beverly Crest, which is another hotel bar. But it went really, really badly. Like Billy, like I felt like we were going to be killed by the bouncers there. But right at the very end of our tenure as a band, we got a gig at this place called the Riviera Rock Room. And the Riviera Rock Room was connected to the Riviera Hotel, but it was the closest thing Edmonton had to sort of a nightclub. It actually kind of felt like a nightclub. And so we got a gig there, and it was basically the height of our popularity because I think we sold it out all 3 nights, and it was like a big ass room. And I remember just thinking, wow. But this is right at that moment was when Bob was going to leave the band because I think he didn't think we were punk enough, and he joined the Rock and Roll Bitches right after that. And so I wouldn't even say punk enough. He got so into the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. He just wanted to be a little more dangerous, I guess. And so anyway, so that was that was maybe the moment where, okay, we can do something more like a more mainstream kind of thing. The other thing was the other place to play in Edmonton, you could get gigs at the university. So the university, because some people, if they're not, of my vintage or whatever, like when punk started, it wasn't like the people that you see at punk shows now. It was like nerds.
Yeah.
The people who came to punk shows were nerds, And
It's still like that, Mo. It's definitely still
to some,
kinda
yeah,
like
but so it was no one had a mohawk or anything like that. Like, some people, people wore leather jackets and stuff like that and tried to look semi like the Ramones, but like, you go to play at the, and so that would turn out to be a thing for us. We could go to Saskatoon and Regina, and we could play at their university. We couldn't play anywhere else, but we could play at the university, and you'd see people, and there'd be this nerdy guy and girl that were like studying, astrophysics in college, and they say, "Hey, have you heard Too Drunk to Fuck? It's a pretty good song," and it almost seemed like they were saying, like, have you watched the new episode of Bonanza or something. Like, the words coming out of their mouth and seem very odd, kind of.
Yeah.
And I say, yeah, we've heard it, So that's the people that you were playing to. You were playing to like a whole group of nerds, and then a few people that were sort of like cosplaying as punk rockers, sort of.
And I guess that's the first divide that kind of comes is like as new wave and hardcore kind of rear their heads. And then I guess in England you have the Oi. And anarcho punk, and there's more fractures that I guess to come over time, but it feels like hardcore new wave is like 81.
Yes,
on
81 seems to be a very important year, and just DOA doing hardcore 81, and just the music changed a lot right around there. Yes, for sure.
It's interesting. DOA's first show was with at a biker barbecue picnic thing,
right?
Too. So I feel like there's, especially early on, there's almost like this weird thing, like you're saying, there's nerds there, but it also appeals to this sort of like underbelly type thing. Certainly at CBGB's, and I guess the association in different places. So you do have bands playing biker barbecues and things like that, like versus, as it goes on, it kind of becomes its own little subculture unto itself.
Right. Well, I think also the other thing that we got at our shows were people who were into metal. And so you get people with Motorhead shirts at your shows and stuff like that. So they sort of saw this as an extension of that, like, playing hard, playing fast, like playing really fast. And that was sort of the Modern Minds shtick, was that we played faster than everybody else. Like, even if it was a really poppy thing, like even when you listen to the single, all those songs are like, they're kind of poppy songs, but they're all at like 198 beats per minute.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And so, so that was kind of our thing, is we kind of played faster than everybody else.
Are there any bands coming through, like touring bands from other places?
Yeah. So one of the things that was a big source of good fortune for us was the Pointed Sticks decided they liked us. And so the Pointed Sticks were kind of like our idols, and they were also kind of our mentors. And so anytime they came through town, we'd open the show. And and then, they took us on a little road trip to like Saskatoon and Regina and stuff like that, and we played shows with them. Also, funnily enough, on those shows was a band called the Hi-Fis.
Oh yeah,
the Hi-Fis, who was Greg and Jim from Blue Rodeo, and that was one of the funniest moments.
What a fucking tour! Are there flyers or posters or anything?
There may be. Anyway, so anyway, we did the show, and so we opened, and then the Hi-Fis played, and then the Pointed Sticks played, and so the thing about being a band in Edmonton was like you had to be kind of good, like you had to be able to play and stuff like that, like, and so we, and those guys came from Toronto, and so we played these shows, and we played our show, and then afterwards they go, "You guys know how to play." Like very completely seriously, like they were like, "This isn't what we were expecting," because I think a lot of the bands in Toronto were just like, hey, I want to be in a punk band, I don't really know how to play, and which was kind of the ethos at the time, which was great,
Yeah.
But we were the sort of like the beneficiaries of like, having to grind it out, and
could play in cover bands and learn how to play these other styles and stuff.
So anyway, so the Pointed Sticks were kind of like our, and so we could always play their shows. They do big shows at the university, and we could play with them, and so I'm still feel like I'm friends with them. But yeah, they were definitely a band that kind of helped us a lot.
That tour to me is like the Canadian power pop unity tour. Like the three bands also being like from different parts of Canada kind of coming together on that tour.
Right.
I had no idea that ever happened. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And Jim was on the show, and I don't think that even came up.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if it was a momentous occasion for them, but this is just part of our whole being able to play. And then, we went to Vancouver and we were able to open for them at the Cave and places like that. So.
And that extended too, because when the Modern Mind single was reissued in the early 2000s, it was on the same label that did the Point of Six reissues.
Yes,
back
that's
then.
right, the Japanese label.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole other interesting story. But, yeah.
Hopefully we'll get there, but
Yeah.
I got a lot more to get to from
okay.
back then too. It did feel like there was a bit of a divide though between Toronto. I guess geographically, like it's so much distance to kind of cover that between that and sort of like the central western
Right.
Canada scene.
Right. So, Toronto was somewhat unknown to us. Like, I remember buying, like, The Last Pogo, and stuff like that. But I didn't feel like...
What did you think of The Last Pogo as a record when you got it?
As a record, I mean, there wasn't a lot on there. They just seemed like a bunch of, like, rock bands to me.
It's
like,
a really weird punk record to go back and listen to.
And so, because I was used to listening to the stuff from Vancouver, like in Vancouver, like the Subhumans would come, or the first DOA show in Edmonton was just insane. So, because I was, as I've been saying, like people were really hungry for this, and so anyway, DOA played, and they played a hall. Someone rented a hall, and they played this hall. This is pretty early, and I remember there was a guy. There was a record store called Obscure Alternatives in Edmonton, and it was basically just in an office building. It was just like it looked like somebody's office, and they sold whatever records, and what was the guy's name? He ended up being a really big person in the music industry.
Did they put out the Interspace record? It came from Interspace?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. And so anyway, oh God, I really need to remember that guy's name. Anyway, so I remember going up there, because I used to just go up there and say hi, and you'd hang out, and there'd be people that you knew there, and DOA was sitting there, and it was like, that was the first time I saw really kind of like cut off leather jacket, like biker looking punk rockers, and I was like, these guys are a bit scary. and so I saw them, and they were kind of sullen and didn't really say hi, and it was okay. And then I went to the show that night, and they got about 7 encores, and I was listening. I was in the room, and I was like, guys, stop! They're gonna get mad at us. Like, they're gonna get mad if we don't let them go. Like, stuff like. And I didn't. In my mind, I didn't think they probably thought this was freaking awesome. The kids were so into them. And so, so that was like how hungry people were. So DOA was like a real punk band. Like, they played really fast and really hard, and I thought they're incredible. That was their sort of like that classic lineup with like Randy and Chuck Biscuits.
Oh yeah, the 4-piece.
It was a 3-piece.
Oh, 3-piece.
There was still a
3-piece.
3-piece. Yeah.
Lineup. Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
So that was like the something's got to change.
Oh yeah.
Kind of lineup.
So early.
Very early.
They're the band that comes up a lot as being, they showed up in town and then things kind of changed for people, and I guess they get a lot more credit for this now, but they were the band that taught Black Flag how to tour. They were the band that kind of like showed up in DC, that all the DC kids were like, these guys look like superheroes. Like, they feel like they had that sort of otherworldly kind of presence.
Yeah. I mean, they would be on the road, and they'd just be in a van, and they'd, sleep in the van, and then go wash their armpits in the McDonald's and get a, McMuffin and get on to the next town. Like, crazy stuff, yeah.
How much connection was there between Edmonton and Calgary in terms of punk scenes?
Not that much. Probably more connection between Edmonton and Vancouver, honestly. Calgary, we'd go down and we'd play the Calgarian, and there was also a place called the National, and these were like just the most grimy bars in the world. Like, staying at when I think about staying 6 nights, because you'd play there for 6 nights, like you'd play Monday to Saturday there. And because they'd sort of designated themselves as sort of like a punk / new wave bar, so that was like one of the most legit places in Alberta to play, and because like I said, in the early days, it wasn't that hard to fill a place like that, because everybody would come because they didn't have anywhere else to go to hear that music, and I like, it's traumatizing thinking back, staying there. It was like the worst hotel in the entire world that I've ever been in, and so. And, like, it was, they never came to clean the rooms or anything like that. And, like, by Saturday night, like, your whole room was just full of all your garbage from all your takeout food and stuff like that. It was disgusting. But, yeah, so there was that. But, yeah, we didn't see, like, a lot of the Calgary bands, I wasn't really that aware of them. We didn't really cross paths. But Vancouver, like, ultimately, our first... Randy Boyd was the guy.
Okay.
And he's kind of like the godfather of the Edmonton punk scene. He's kind of like the guy who overseen and organized a lot of stuff. Anyway, organized a trip for us to go to Vancouver and play at the Smiling Buddha. And so we drove like there with him and Dale Luis, who ended up just moving there, who was in the Rock and Roll Bitches, in the Legal Limit. And I got there, and it was going to be us and the Modernettes and this band called No Fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, so we get on stage, and we played. They said, just play for like a half an hour. So we played like a half-hour set, and then the Modernettes came on, and they opened with Confidential, and it was just like, I was just like, I don't even know what I'm listening to right now. This is the most amazing song I've ever heard in my entire life, and I've just become a lifelong Modernettes fan. Like, I still could listen to their music anytime and still be just like completely blissed out. So that was that. And then anytime anybody, like if the Modernettes came to, or Subhumans, or any of these bands came to Edmonton, we'd often play with them. Anyway, very important note here. Randy Boyd started a club in a very unfortunately called the Suicide Club. And so, anyway, so it was like they found a space and built a stage, and we played twice. There was a night that it was like the Modernettes and the Subhumans, killer bill.
Wow.
And there was one other night that I think was Vancouver bands. It may have been DOA, I'm not sure. And that was it. Four weekends, and it was over.
Was it just like issues with cops, or like sustaining a...
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was.
Okay.
It just, and then I remember after a month it just ended. But yeah, that was the closest we ever came to having like our own kind of place. So Randy Boyd was the guy who did that. Yeah.
Well, one person that did link the Calgary and the Edmonton scene who came on the show was Bruce McCullough.
Right.
And he said when he moved up to Edmonton, him and Callum Keith Rennie, it sounds like I'm just making this up, but like he talked about it on the show, and you probably know about this for real, kind of would roll around with the Rock and Roll Bitches and were kind of like a bad element. Like he self-professed that he was kind of part of like a little bit of a bad element.
Oh yeah, for sure they were. I mean, Bruce, I love him. Like we're
He admitted on the show, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like we're talking at a school.
No. Like, and so there was him and Callum, and there was a couple of other guys, and you'd see them, and they'd come to like Blue Oyster Cult. You go see Blue Oyster Cult and stuff like that, and they'd be acting up even there. And so anyway, so Bruce would see the Modern Minds, like, and so I recently did a show with him. He had me to come on and sort of be his music guy, because often he gets Craig Northey from Odds and from my band, the Trans-Canada Highwaymen, to be his musical director guy. And so I came and did a show, and he said, what I want you to play 20 Years Old, which was kind of one of the Modern Minds anthems. And he also put it in his show. Yeah,
what's it? The punk. Oh man, it's based on his book too, right? Yeah. Young Drunken Punk.
Yeah, Young Drunk Punk. And so he was a big fan at the time, and so he would have seen us play. Anyway, then I got to know Bruce better, and we're friends, and I love him. He's just the greatest guy.
So when Bruce was on the show, he mentioned getting stabbed at a Husker Du show in Calgary. Was there a lot of violence up in Edmonton? Because there is it's a hard town at times too, right? So
not a ton of violence. It was, I think some of that stuff happened later. I remember the Calgarian used to hear stuff going on, like some, the bouncers go in and find some kid on the ground in the bathroom or something like that. But there wasn't a ton of that in Edmonton. I don't know if this is the right time to say this in terms of the chronology of this podcast, but like when I started to get sort of disenchanted with the punk scene, like what I loved about punk rock when I started was it was so the opposite of everything I grew up with. And so living in Edmonton was hard for a person like me, and like being called homosexual pejorative would be a very normal thing for me, and so I like, it was just all cowboys, just a bunch of cowboys and macho people, and everybody in town was an asshole, basically, as far as I was concerned. so anyway, so punk was not that. It was everything that wasn't. And so when punk sort of turned hardcore, I felt that creeping back into it. I felt like that whole macho, people were angry, fighting, and like that kind of thing started creeping. We started seeing, and so anyway, Edmonton was so cute because like like a lot of people in Edmonton would sort of try to be punk, like, and so one of the things, this would have been before your time, but one of the things you would do to show your appreciation to the band, would you spit on them?
Yes.
And so this was a thing. And you just kind of, that was okay. Like, I was fine. Someone, it was half the time the spit would never even get to you, like it would be so far back, spit. So anyway, the modern minds are getting, like, it feels like the whole thing is going to sort of end soon. I just had that feeling. And so anyway, we're playing a show at the university, and we're playing at a stage that's about maybe 6-8 inches off the ground. So we're just barely elevated above the audience. So there's this guy, and I don't know if I ever knew his name. I probably did, but he was like this super rich kid in Edmonton, and his dad was like the chief surgeon at the university hospital. He was someone kind of like he always had like a beautiful leather jacket on and very brand new Motorhead T-shirt all the time when he came to the shows. So he came to the show that night, and he stood in front of me, like almost as close as we are right now, and just spit at me the whole thing. I was covered in this kid's gob, like covered. My guitar was covered in it, my face, all my clothes. And as I was just having this existential moment, like, is this what I really want to do? Like, is this good? Like, is this a good thing? And we gotten through like a lot of the set, like most of it, and I was just like, I'm not quitting. Like, I am not quitting. Like, I'm not, like a lot of people would be like, fuck this. And I was like, I'm not quitting. And then just as I'm thinking this, I just see a fist coming into like my field of vision, and a guy just had enough of it and knocked this kid out cold. Like, he just, bam, he went right down. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. Like, wow. A kid get knocked out. And he wasn't a kid, he was a gigantic kid. And I felt like the cops were there. I'm like, a minute. Because I think there'd been a show, and I think there was some trouble at the show. And I remember the Edmonton Sun saying, next day, punk rock violence or punk rock riot. It was punk rock riot. I think I still have it.
That's awesome.
Punk rock riot. And I was like, oh my God, punk rock riot, probably someone was drunk. That was Edmonton for you. So anyway, as soon as that happened, I was kind of like, I don't know about this. Like, I just don't know. Like, I wasn't sure I wanted to play for a bunch of sweaty guys with no shirts on kind of thing. I kind of wanted to play with girls who come to the show and stuff like that, And I just kind of like, and so even the bands I had after the Modern Minds we still played faster than anybody else, but it was definitely more, we sort of leaned into the sort of more power pop kind of thing so that kind of became our signature, and that sort of led me to where I ended up being with the Pursuit of Happiness.
So how did the relationship with Bumstead start? Was that like, because what's the guy's name?
Larry Wanagus.
Yeah, Larry Wanagus. Yeah, how did that relationship?
So very early in our career, so one of the things that we were also beneficiaries of was in Edmonton, like I'm sure many other Canadian cities, like the radio stations had these sort of CanCon rules. And so one of the things...
15% back then, right? Or was it...
I'm not sure, yeah. But one of the things a lot of the things that radio stations would do to sort of, they would do on Sunday night, they would record a show, and they'd interview you, and you'd record a bunch of songs, and they'd play it. So that would be like a full hour of CanCon that they could get away with, so they could play more, like Journey songs, through the week kind of thing. The very first one we did was for, I don't know if it was for K97 or CKRA. Those are the two FM stations. And so we did it. Larry Wanagus had a recording studio, an 8-track recording studio. And so we recorded all the songs we were going to do for that show there. And so he saw us and heard us. He said, "You guys are cool, and I want to manage you." And so he did. He was kind of our manager. And and he said, I'm starting a record label, and I'll put out a single, because we were like, we want to be on Quintessence Records. That was our dream, more than like we want to be on Warner Brothers or anything. It's like, if we could be on Quintessence Records, that would be like, I can't think of anything that would be greater than that, but he was like, I want you to be on my label, and I kind of resented him for a while after that, but so that was the connection.
His label ran a lot longer than Quintessence did.
Well, yeah. So he ended up like discovering, I guess, Katie Lang, and that just became kind of his meal ticket for a long time after that.
Yeah, because I think the first Katie Lang single is Bumstead 003.
Yeah.
And in between there's, which I've never heard this, but the Takoi
Ride, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the other band he was kind of managing at the same time with us, and they were kind of like the Allman Brothers.
I was always wondering, is this worth
Yeah.
getting? So,
No.
Thank you for.
Yeah, they were kind of an Allman Brothers. They loved the Allman. They did Allman Brothers covers, and they're also like a biker connection with that band too. So
Oh, so it is worth getting. Okay,
no,
back on the wall.
it's kind of like as a collector, I would say get it, but I don't know if you're gonna dig the music. They were really good. They were a great band. Like they could play great and all that. And they were very, they're really into the blues and playing the blues and stuff like that. And so in that way, they were kind of a cool band. But yeah, nothing to do with like the sort of underground scene or anything.
Well, the Katie Lang single is definitely still on my want list. And was Katie Lang going to shows at all, or?
I would imagine. I never really saw her around. I mean, by the time I met her and be friendly with her, it was pretty. She had just started with Larry, and so she was recording stuff and playing shows, and her shows were sensations. Like people would line up to see her play, and so she hadn't really made her first record yet. But yeah, she was sort of a sensation, like
out of the gate type thing.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. Well, she's a crazy performer. So
yes. So yeah, her performance style, and also the fact she was a great singer, and the whole sort of like, that was right around the time that whole sort of like cowpunk thing was happening too, because of like, who am I thinking of? Like
X and
especially like Rank and File.
Rank and File,
like that. Yeah. Rank and File had sort of moved from punk to sort of that country stuff.
Blood of the Saddle was another one, right? I guess. Like, well, it's also interesting because that was a response to the violence in LA, I think, too.
Right.
Like a lot of people just being scared off, and it's interesting how that was like in the same way. I guess you're talking about in Edmonton too with yourself, like. It's almost like an impetus for people to kind of like branch off and find something new or build a new little sub scene or just,
right.
So I don't know. It's a destructive force, but ultimately leads to new creativity and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Larry also worked with the Reds from Philadelphia. I learned while researching this.
Yes.
Which a super obscure band, but went up on a major label, I guess. But that first single they did is awesome.
Well, I believe they did a record. If I'm not mistaken, they did a record with a guy named Holger Peterson. Holger Peterson is sort of like the roots godfather of Edmonton. He worked at a radio station called CK. What's it called? It's like a community radio station there. It's kind of big.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still happening, but it was. So this community radio station, he was kind of the main guy there, and so he was involved with a lot of, sort of roots kind of people and roots kind of music. He was big in the Edmonton folk festival scene and stuff like that. But he signed the Reds, and I think I have, and it was like a full album they did, and I think I have it still. It was like a full album of the Reds.
Yeah, that's like the third record or something. Or
it may be, yeah.
Record?
So yeah, I think they had already had a little bit going on.
They'd been on A&M, I think, first.
Yeah, and so they had a bit going on, and then he signed them, and I don't know. I wouldn't say that was probably the key to their success, signing with some little rootsy indie label in Edmonton, but it was probably like, hey, I'll put out your record, and they were probably like, great. And it might have been like for Canada only, and they probably had other deals going in like the States or out in Europe and stuff.
Their first single, Victims, is awesome. Like, but then I think, they went really new wave, and then I think probably ultimately Roots is... These bands are desperately searching for sounds.
Well, they definitely weren't roots on that record. Okay. It was still hard stuff.
Oh, like,
it was pretty hard and like no harmonies or anything, just like a, guy kind of spitting lyrics and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I got to hear that. Yeah. I'm gonna so many records add to the want list.
I wish I could. If I find it, I'll just bring it to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So then you do Face Crime, right? Like, or is there another band?
Yeah. So there was a band called Troc 59. And so Kim left our band, and Dave and Bob Drysdale left our band. Bob went to the Rock and Roll Bitches, and Kim went. And Kim ended up, he joined the Malibu Kens. That's what he did. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I was kind of like, well, there was a band in Winnipeg, called what were they called? I don't know. Anyway, so they had a drummer, Dave Gilby, who has been with me to this moment, and I said, but that wasn't who I was after. There was a band called the Fuse from Winnipeg. Okay. And they were kind of like, I would say they were kind of Springsteen-esque, but they still had they were part of the new wave scene, but that was kind of like their, if you had to describe them musically, it was more like that. Mm-hmm. And so they had a bass player. And I thought the bass player was really great. And he could sing and he could play bass. He wasn't the singer in the band, but he could sing. And I thought this guy would be really cool. So me and Larry got in Larry's car and we drove to the Calgarian where they were playing. and we saw them play, and so I asked him. I said, "Would you consider moving to Edmonton and joining my band?" So the Modern Minds had a bit of fame, like, and so it was kind of like, I guess he probably thought maybe that's an opportunity for me to go and do something a little bit better. And I said, we got a manager, we got a label, and so he said, and finally he said, "I'll come if I can bring my drummer, Dave." I said, "Okay." I needed a drummer too, so I had like an instant band, and so we called that band Troc 59. And so there was like a bit of an adjustment with the band, because I was used to like a very punk sounding rhythm orchestra, like, da 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 da. That was what we did. And so they played a little bit differently, and it was kind of a bit of I kind of had to teach them how to play a little bit. And we did some of Gene, the bass player, we did some of his songs, and his songs, I don't think they really fit in with what I was doing, but I was kind of exploring things a little bit too. I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life, and so that lasted for a while, and we got a little bit more, aggressive, and then Gene was having a really hard time adjusting to life outside of Winnipeg. He had a big family man, and he was having trouble, and I remember going and getting him out of jail and stuff like that, and I was like, and he's like, I just can't deal with this, I can't, and I gotta go home, and which was probably a really good idea. He was probably on a path to self-destruction, and so he became very good friends with rock and roll bitches. George, yeah. So and stuff, and they would go off and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So anyway, so then I got Bob Drysdale back in the band, and then the I would say that Troc 59 was not wildly dissimilar from the Modern Minds. Like, we played a lot of melodic stuff, but we were still playing. We had songs that were like, a Message from Her was like 220 beats per minute. It was so fast, I could barely play it. Like, we still did a lot of fast stuff, but it was, I think enough time had passed from the Modern Minds where we were in some other world that wasn't, and then punk had gotten very hardcore at that time, so we were sort of in a way separate from that. But we still played really, really fast. So that band lasted for a few years.
Did you guys put a record, Troc?
We never did, but again, we did some of those radio show things, and so.
Do you have all those radio show things?
I have some of that stuff, yeah. Man. So I found some stuff and some live stuff, because I have a friend out in Edmonton. He said, if you ever find any of that stuff, I would kill for that. And so I found a bunch of Troc 59 stuff, and I digitized it, and I sent it to him, and his message back to me was like, outside the birth of my first child, this is the greatest moment of my life. Like, he didn't say his marriage. He has 3 other kids. And
well, I think this means you got to reissue this. Like, I think if it's that good, I think we all need to hear it.
And so anyway, so I think, no, Troc 59. I didn't know if we had it in one of those compilations. Those It Came from Canada things. Maybe Face Crime was on that, but
you guys came from Inner Space. Face Crime.
Yeah.
So, but like one of the odd comps. Like you mean, or they came from?
I'm just trying to think if Troc 59 was ever on. I don't think we were. So there were some radio shows and some live stuff from there, and then there's a bunch of live Modern Mind stuff and stuff, and that was how we were able to cobble together that record for that Japanese release, and then later on for Simon's release on Ugly Pop.
Wow, that's so crazy! I had no idea. Like there was that band in between.
Yeah,
because Face Crime's like. It feels like all this stuff's happening pretty quickly too, right? Like,
well, yeah. So I guess the Modern Minds started in 1979, and so we put out our first single in 1980, the one and only single, and then around 1981 was probably when we kind of fell apart, and so from 1981 to probably 1983 or so or around there was Troc 59, then and then. Face Crime. Fuck, what kind of name is that? And was for like the last year and a half that I was in Edmonton before I moved out to Toronto.
So what is the origin of the name Face Crime? I've never asked someone, like, what's the meaning behind your band name? I've always wondered.
Well, very late in life, it seems like, because I was in my early 20s, I really got into like 1984 and all those sort of like dystopian futuristic books.
Yeah.
So it's from that book.
Oh, it's from 84.
And so I thought a great band name would have been 2 Minutes Hate.
Yeah.
But I thought,
I think there is a 2 Minutes of Hate too.
Probably by now. Yeah, there has to be.
I think there was even like a British one back then even.
Maybe.
So.
And I was thinking that would be good, but then I thought, oh, you know what, it doesn't really describe us at this point. And I said, maybe Face Crime seemed funny too, and so we did that, and I was just like, and I regret it ever since. But
There's a real kind of dark post-punk, I guess, not a real, but there is a little bit more of a dark post punk vibe to that record. I found.
The Face Crime record?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were that record was kind of like that was sort of like when we were good.
Okay.
Because after that we became not good. And
What was the sound check?
Okay, so because I mean, this whole after punk rock, and I don't get me wrong, I was still listening to punk music all the time. I was still listening to it. I was still a fan, but I was very much a musical explorer at that moment. So I was listening to all kinds of stuff, and I was being very influenced by anybody who sort of came into my world and said, "Oh, you should listen to this." And so when Dave came and he was in my band and he moved to, he started working in record stores, and so he got all this stuff and he said, I've heard this thing, you should come down and buy it. I'll sell it to you for $1 kind of thing. And so I started getting into a bunch of different kind of music, and then I started to like get into synthesizers. I thought synthesizers are kind of neat, and this is probably the future, and I should check this out. So I bought like an original Juno 60, and so I had it. It's like weighs like 400 pounds, and so I got that, and I thought we should put this in the band. Big mistake. And so so that was Face Crime. So Face Crime was also doing the whole guitar based thing, and so that's when we did the record. And then after that, that's when I sort of got the synthesizer, and we started doing a little bit of that. And Dave Gilby got an SH-101, which I wish he still had that. And so our bass player, this guy named Blaine Vanstone, started playing that. So we do like 4 or 5 songs like that, and then we do all our other stuff our normal stuff that we did, which was still relatively aggressive power pop.
There is a scene of sort of progressive keyboard music too from Edmonton, right?
Yeah, there was a few bands that were doing that. There was a band called Voice.
Yeah.
And there was another band, I can't think of their name.
No, I think I have their single. They went on afterwards, right? If I'm thinking of the same band.
There was another band that was, I can't think of who they were, but I think the guitar player in the other band ended up being in Voice. But there was another band that did kind of keyboard, and when they started, they were very kind of like, wow, what is going on here? A lot of kids in Edmonton were like, this is really cool. They got a synthesizer player. Yeah. And there was a lot of that music happening at the time, like synthesizers gotten in the mainstream a bit, like like Depeche Mode and New Order, all that kind of stuff, or before New Order, Joy Division, that kind of thing. So a lot of people were I sort of felt like I was behind the times because everybody was getting into that more, that kind of stuff.
Definitely that seems like on that Face Crime LP, I hear Joy Division a little bit on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were just kind of influenced by whatever was going on, and there was like a fast power pop element to it, obviously still, but yeah, so after that we got into this sort of, and then living in Edmonton, like the whitest town in the planet, like there was a show on the university radio station called The Black Experience in Sound, and it was I think it's Cadence Weapon's dad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Was the DJ for that.
Oh, crazy, okay.
I hope I'm right about that. I think I am. And his name is Teddy, I think. And so I was like, I discovered Prince, and right around there, I was really going back and remembering all like the Stevie Wonder records and stuff like that. And then Dave said, you got to hear this stuff that just came in. And so it was this band called Wolf Ticket, and they were like one of the very first like hip hop bands that like kind of I ever heard. They had a 12-inch single called Yo Mama, which is like this sort of quintessential sort of like making fun of your mama's.
Yeah, mama joke type thing.
Mama joke record. And so the whole thing is that. And I thought, this is friggin' awesome. And then right after that came like The Message and, White Lines and New York, New York. And I thought, this music is amazing. Like, this is so cool. All this early hip hop stuff. And I went at the Varsco in the theater, they had that movie Wild Side came out. Wild Style. And so it was all about the burgeoning hip hop scene in New York. And so it was like breakdancing and graffiti and rap music, hip hop. I don't even know if people even called it rap yet, but it was just about that. And I thought, this is freaking insane. Like, this is such a cool thing. Like, so one of the things that was always a real big inspiration for me as a kid was like thinking about what was going on in cities that were bigger than me. And I always thought, like, when I heard Lou Reed, I just thought, this sounds like music that's in a place that's so different from where I am. You know, even hearing Kiss made me feel that way. You know, and I just like, so when I saw that, I was like, there's a world out there that is so different from where I am and what I'm doing right now. And that was always super appealing because my whole life it was like, I cannot wait to get out of here. Like, I cannot wait until I'm out of this place. You know, so yeah. So now the so now this face crime band, we started experimenting with this kind of thing, terrible stuff. But we could always like make a cassette of it and get it played on like on the college station, on the University of Alberta station. So we had all these stuff, and we got like a couple of backup singers. And actually, the end of Face Crime was basically the prototype for Pursuit of Happiness, because we had two backup singers and a power trio kind of thing. And so that was kind of like, but we were really trying to figure it out then. I wouldn't say that era of Face Crime was great, but it was like, but it was me just trying to figure it out.
It was fruitful in the end.
Yeah, in the end, I sort of figured things out.
Were like those tapes that you're getting played on the radio station, were those like demo tapes that you would have for sale at shows too?
No. Selling stuff at shows wasn't necessarily a thing at the time. That wasn't really. I didn't see that for a long time after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you guys make demos at all in between these records that you would have at record stores, I guess, or tapes?
We never sold anything. I mean, that Modern Minds record and then the Face Crime record were the only kind of commercial things I ever did, like things that you could buy. We'd make a demo of a song and then we just give it to a radio station, say, you want to play this? And there'd be nowhere for a kid to buy it or anything or even get it. If they heard it on the radio, that was the only place to hear it.
Yeah, like it's also fascinating to me, like what bands made T-shirts or how T-shirts were made, because it doesn't feel like that was an established part of the economy of being in a band.
Not at all. The first band that really did that, and it was like, this is a great idea, was SNFU.
Yeah.
So SNFU made T-shirts, and their shirts were so great. They had the killer logo and everything. So that was like the first. I never remember bands having T-shirts until they did.
So I guess SNFU's sort of, and Down Syndrome, I guess,
yes.
too, are like the next wave of bands. Both I think are also on the Inner Space compilation with Face Crime. Would you play with those bands? Like, was there a crossover between? Not
really. By that point, like I met Ken when he was like 14. And so he'd come to like Modern Mind shows, and he'd be in, like, there was this idea in that at that time, fashion idea where you'd wear a suit.
Yes.
Sometimes, and that would be like, a lot of bands wore that. All the Jam wore suits and stuff like that.
Bad Brains even did in their early videos.
Yeah.
And stuff.
So anyway, so he'd be there in like his like a leisure suit. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
It was like
70s.
Yeah, 70s leisure. And I'd see Ken, and he's like in the front, and he's bopping, and it's like, this kid is so cool. And I talked to him, and and he was like, in my high school, I'm like, we have a radio station. I'm part of the radio station, and they play like, and so he was just like a kid that loved music. Like he was just an adorable kid, and then whatever time goes by. And yeah, so Down Syndrome would have preceded SNFU. Like I remember hearing about, they were sort of like, they were kind of in between the first wave and the second wave. And so, but I don't remember ever doing any shows with them. And so, but yeah, fast forward. And so, I'm, by this point, this is right when I'm getting ready. And I sort of, I was friendly with the guys in the band, and I was always friendly with Ken, and I liked them, and I always thought they were good. And then this was another kind of seminal moment for me, was like, there was one place like later on that, Face Crime would play, maybe even Track 59, maybe it was around that time, but it was called Scandals, and it was also a disco attached to a hotel, the Sheridan Hotel downtown. And so I had lived in Edmonton. I moved back in with my mom in St. Albert because I didn't have any money, and I was thinking about what I was going to do next. I was thinking about moving to Toronto. And so to get to Scandals was a take a bus somewhere and then wait like 45 minutes and then take another bus somewhere and then walk for an hour, and then you get to Scandals. And so you'd leave at like 6 o'clock to get to the gig at 9.
Yeah.
And I was by myself, and so I go, and I just remember getting there. And this would be just after And No One Else Wanted to Play happened. I remember hearing No One Else Wanted to Play, and it's like, what is this record? This is insane. And I thought, because honestly, and you will know more about this, but like I really felt like that was pretty revolutionary. Like I feel like a lot of bands listen to that and figured their stuff out after that record. And so there was other people doing that kind of music, but like all the tempo changes and stuff like that, like I thought that was pretty new for me anyway. And so and I got to Scandals and I saw their show and it was like, this is the greatest band that's ever come out of this city. There's nobody even close to this. Like they are so good. Like the Belkey brothers, like it was insane how good they were. And I just remember that was one of my last real memories of Edmonton was like SNFU is the greatest thing that's ever come out of here. Like better than Katie Lang, better than my bands, better than anything. Like they're fantastic.
Yeah, I think Chai Pig's like maybe up there with HR as the greatest front person of all time.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I feel like, and it's a shame because all the bands we're talking about here, and you know this better than anyone, that Canada doesn't really give you a second act. And so I feel like SNFU has never been celebrated in the way they kind of deserved in Canada because we don't really do that here
Right.
unless it's the hip, I guess, or like there's
Right.
certain acts that kind of are given this reverence.
Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah, Gordon Lightfoot, as you say. But and weirdly, Simple Plan now has just had a documentary made about their career.
So wild, yeah.
So, but like here we are with this band that, like I saw them. God, it would have been, I guess, 15 years later after when you were seeing, maybe less than that, like at least 12 years later. And they were still the best band I'd ever seen at that point. Like, you know, he's throwing fireballs on stage and still jumping huge heights in the air.
Right.
And, yeah, I just feel like it's one of, again, sort of the great tragedies of like where you're from geographically dictates kind of the path you have. Because if they were a Vancouver or Toronto band, I think they would have even had more of an impact. They did. Like they obviously toured and had this massive impact, but I think it would have been even greater because it's a long drive to get across the border.
It's and I also feel like you may disagree with this. I feel like they were like in many ways they were like Canada's Ramones, which is to say their influence was bigger than their actual success. So I mean the Ramones are iconic because of their T-shirts and stuff like that, but they never sold any records, you know. And same with the Sex Pistols. Sex Pistols, I think it took like 25 years for Nevermind the Bollocks to go gold or platinum or whatever.
Yeah.
But SNFU was that band. Like, you know, they influenced so many people, but they never really, as you say, they never really got their due, you know, as sort of like the greatest Canadian punk band of all time. And maybe DOA is, I don't know, but
Yeah.
and for my mind, they're kind of the greatest Canadian punk band of all time.
Yeah, like DOA, I got to see DOA, and DOA was always amazing, but I feel like there are certain eras of DOA that if you saw it, it would be transcendental, whereas I think SNFU were kind of consistent in what they were as a band. Like, they were always that top shelf. I saw them at the very last tour. The Balky Brothers were out of the band and everything, and it was, I would say that was maybe a little bit not quite the same as it had been, but still it was great. Like, they were, and he could write a song too. Like, some of those later songs he had, it's like, man, this is up there with Tragically Hip. Like, I can see this being played on the radio.
Right.
Some of the ballads.
Yeah. Well, there's a show you're talking about when they played at the Velvet Underground?
No, they played at 360 with No Warning opening.
Oh, so that would have been before then. Because they played at the Velvet Underground, like literally just before
Oh,
Ken
I didn't
died.
see that, no.
Yeah, just before Ken died, he came, and I hadn't seen those guys, and so this is like, yeah. So and I became friendly with the bass player and stuff, and so I remember going to the show and seeing Ken and like talking to him, and it's just like, it was so hard to not see him as a 14-year-old kid. Like I could even feel it in his voice. He still sounded like a kid to me, and he's saying all this freaking crazy stuff, and it was just so nice to see him, and you know, just like. And then they played the show, and he's like making fun of me off the stage, and there was stuff like that. It's like, this is so on brand, you know, and so it was just great. And then he passed not long after that, which was, you know, I mean,
I guess there's a lot of tragedy too with that story with him.
yeah,
as well.
no, he had a crazy life for sure, yeah.
And I feel like that's the other thing that, you know, will test a band and hold a band back at times too, is like a member who has that sort of trauma that they're dealing with, or issues that they're kind of working their way through.
Right.
But I guess they did have a kind of a long run after the Belky Brothers left. So it was like maybe almost 10 years,
Right.
8 years, like that too. What made you decide to move to Toronto over moving to Vancouver?
Well, yeah, I guess a lot of it was, so like Truck 59 or even Face Crime, but mostly Truck 59, we would always be the opening band for Teenage Head or the Diodes or the Bobcats or any of the Toronto bands that came through. And so we thought, pretty thriving scene over there. And then I had a couple of friends in Edmonton. A guy named Nello Giran, who was working for the National Film Board. He moved to Toronto. And then I had his other friend, Belinda Robbins. She moved to Toronto to start working for a big video production company in Toronto. And I thought, okay. And then I had another friend, this guy named Ronald Ramage, who was the crazy dancer in the I'm an Adult Now video. He went to work in video out in Toronto as well. And so so I had a bunch of friends out there. And I said, Toronto is, if I'm doing this, Toronto's where the music industry is. It's like we could go to Vancouver, but it would be marginally better than what I'm doing now. But that's where it is. And so I went, and and so Belinda said, "Come and visit. Just come and visit, and you can crash at my place." And I said, "Okay." So I went for a week, and I got there and opened up Now magazine, and I'm looking through, and I said, "Wow, look at all these shows." And they said, "Yeah, those shows are tonight." And I was like, "That's how many shows are in Edmonton in a whole year."
Yeah.
And I was like, I think this is where I need to be. And so every night I went out and saw a show, went to Larry's Hideaway and went to the Rivoli and went to all these different, places in El Macombo. And I thought, this is where I need to be. And so I sort of got my affairs in order. And I think, a few months later, I was on a plane to Edmonton. On a plane to Toronto.
It's wild because, a lot of these clubs are still here in Toronto, downtown Rivoli's still there. Larry's Hideaway's long gone, obviously, but the Shoe and but it doesn't have that same sort of energy that I guess Toronto had from 85 to 2000 or something, maybe a little bit before that, where every night all those clubs were just packed. And maybe it's like that every other city too, big city.
Right. Well, yeah, I think there was a legit Queen Street scene, where there's a lot of places and either on Queen Street or close. There was Ultrasound. There was the Cabana Room. The Cabana Room was the place that anybody could play. Jimmy Scopes would hire anybody to play there, which was great. If you were a band and you didn't have anything going, you could always get a gig and at least get up on stage. There might not be anybody there, but you could get up on stage and work your thing out.
Yeah.
So yeah, even I can't say I loved playing there, but I'm grateful for it because it was a place to play and you could go and, like I said, just kind of get better.
Yeah, because is Bamboo going at that point too?
Yes, Bamboo was there, and there was a lot of there's probably other places I can't think of right now, but
I guess OCAD still doing shows maybe, or no? Had OCAD stopped doing shows?
What's that?
OCAD, or OCA? Sorry, back then.
Yeah. I think we did one show there early in our career. We did one show there, but and there was other. What was it? The 360 did shows.
Oh yeah, of course.
And lots of places. Yeah, so there was always you could walk down Queen Street and see 3 or 4 bands. Then eventually the Bovine happened and and the Velvet Underground and stuff. So
did you guys ever in either Face Crime or Modern Minds go to the States at all? I know it's a crazy long drive.
No, we never did. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it seemed too scary to try and do that.
I guess Husker Du probably would have come through, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to think what bands, were there touring bands from the U.S. coming out?
Yeah, I think later on.
Okay.
I don't remember a whole bunch of them early. When you'd see bands of sort of punk, new wave, that kind of bands, they're mostly Canadian bands. Vancouver and not even that many bands from Winnipeg would come by. We never saw Personality Crisis or anybody like that come through Edmonton. I don't remember. If they did, it was later, but
I guess Personality Crisis. I guess it's closer to the border, so maybe they're going down to the States.
I bet they did, yeah.
Because they had that record come out on the U.S. label,
right.
And they seem to do a lot of American touring.
Right. Well, I think Junior Gone Wild did, because they got signed to BYO, and so they had the record. That record is so good.
Yeah.
And so I think that gave them a way to get down.
It feels like BY also had a really strong, I guess, post-SNFU connection to Edmonton, because also Unwanted, I think, is a band that's on BYO. Maybe I'm messing up that name. I'm trying to picture the album cover, but I know there are a couple punk bands that did wind up on BYO from Edmonton, or more hardcore stuff later on and stuff. Were you checking out any of the kind of hardcore stuff happening in Toronto at that time? Because it's I find that stuff's super underground, Youth, Brian Taylor's band, or Direct Action, or Chronic Submission.
Right. I would hear about those bands more than I would see them or anything. And even the Vile Tones, I don't think they ever made it to Edmonton while I was there.
No, I don't think they toured much.
Yeah.
I don't think they even maybe played Montreal. I know they did New York, obviously, a couple times. But Yeah, their reputation, I guess, just precedes them a little bit.
Yeah.
The Ugly probably would have been broken up too by the time you moved here, I imagine.
Maybe, yeah. I don't remember seeing them. I remember when I moved to Toronto, like Toronto scene was very eclectic at the time. I remember I think the first show I went to was like the Pucka Orchestra.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, it was, at the time it was like Jane Siberry was really big, and Tall New Buildings, Jean Gameshi's band, and Vital Signs, and there was all kind of a real hodgepodge of stuff. But like there was, I mean, this story has some relevance because when I was in Edmonton, still in Edmonton, this is when I was not ready to move to Toronto yet. I got a cold call from Reed Diamond from Shadowy Man of Shadowy Planet. He had a band called Crash Kills 5. I don't know if you have that single. Yeah.
Don Pyle and
yeah.
incredible record.
What do you do at night? That song, and I thought I had it, and I thought it was really great. And he called me. He said, "I'm starting a band. Would you come and be in my band?" Because he knew the Modern Minds and stuff from Calgary, and from living in Calgary. And so I said, I'm just not ready. I'm not. It's too scary for me right now, and I never did. So when I first got to Toronto, Shadow of Men had blown up. They were huge, and so it was it's a big city and everything, but like literally within the first week that I got to Toronto, I hear, "Hey Mo," and I look over and it's Reed. He said, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "Are you here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here." And he said, and we just talked. And he said, "Whenever you get something together, let me know and you can open for us." And so he did. So our very Pursuit of Happiness's first show was opening to a sold out Rivoli, opening for Shadowy Man. Which is friggin' awesome.
Stephen Page, when he was on, kind of talked about how every room kind of had its own little scene. Maybe it was someone, Bruce McCullough, talking about that too. But like the Rivoli was like, Shadowy Men's place, and then Handsome Ned obviously had Cameron and stuff. It was like, but each of these places kind of had a booker, and with that kind of a sensibility to it.
Right.
Was that the case for you guys too?
Yeah, I think when I first because we didn't fit into any of that stuff. We didn't really have a specific thing we were doing at the time, and so which was, I guess, turned into like our virtue. I guess people said there's nothing really like this, or if you didn't like that was you hated us. So it was like, but yeah. So Cameron was very country, but even the Horseshoe at that time had a sort of a cowpunk thing. You'd see that kind of thing there. And then the Rivoli was more eclectic. Like it was more, that's where you go see if Jane Siberry, if she was slumming it.
Yeah.
Or you'd see like bands like that. And then there was also like Larry's and Cabana Room, and they'd have more just kind of like, that's the Real Statics might play there, or like Plasticine Replicas. I don't know if you're aware of some of these
definitely.
bands. Yeah. So that was that era.
I guess Blue Rodeo would have had the Horseshoe. That was in their room.
That was their room.
Yeah.
So Ned was the Cameron, and Blue Rodeo was the Horseshoe. Yeah.
Was Breeding Ground going in Kinetic Ideals in those bands?
Breeding Ground was still going when I first got here, and I remember we used to cover Happy Now I Know, which is still one of my favorite songs.
They're so good.
Yeah. And so they didn't go for too much long, but I came, I became friends with Chris, and I became friends with singer.
I don't know his name, but he's got such a cool voice.
Yeah, and unfortunately he passed away. But he, he used to work at a bar, right up until near his death, and I see him all the time and talk to him, and great guy. But they were just kind of ending their whole thing there. But Chris ended up starting to produce bands and stuff, and he actually produced some demos for the Pursuit of Happiness.
There's that Mannequin Records label out of Burlington, Ontario. And they did the first Spoons record. They did the Kinetic Ideal, or Spoon record, sorry, the Kinetic Ideal record. They did Breeding Ground, first 12-inch too.
Right.
But it's like one of those labels that is just so obscure completely. But the guy from Ceramic Hello, who I guess ran the label, became a designer for Factory Records at some point.
I'm thinking of the wrong band. Breeding Ground. I was thinking of Blue Peter.
Oh, I love Blue Peter too.
Yeah, I was thinking of Blue Peter. No, Breeding Ground. Yeah, Breeding Ground was still happening, and Blue Peter was still happening, but they were coming to the end of their thing. Both of those bands. So I was sorry, I got that two mixed up.
Yeah, now you know what? That's when you said that song. I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. You're talking about Blue Peter.
Yeah, it was Blue Peter. Yeah.
They were another band that kind of was like a power pop.
Yeah, they were part of that whole mood. They were kind of that whole like Simple Minds kind of that world. Yeah.
So also Blaine Van Stone from I guess Modern Minds moved to Toronto too at a certain point, right? Or
Yes. So he wasn't in the Modern Minds. He was in Face
He
Crime.
was in Face Crime. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
meant to say.
So he was on the record, that Face Crime record
Yeah.
that we put out. And so, yeah, so he was in the band and yeah, so so he was in the band and then again, he was having some like like issues and so we ended up not like we had to like so we sort of parted ways with him and then he moved to Toronto, yeah, and so I would see him occasionally in Toronto. He was working playing with a bunch of other bands, but
Because that's the other Kids in the Hall connection, because he was in Mouth Congress with Scott
okay.
Thompson and
Okay.
Bellini, like their band, which would, I guess, also play the Rivoli around that time.
right.
Have you heard any of that stuff?
No.
So good. It's like the Toronto beat happening or something.
Oh.
Like it's really, I don't know, it's really weird. Like very, very awesome stuff. I've kept you for a long time, and there's like tons more that I wanted to punish you about. But will you come back for a part 2 at some point?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but before you go, a couple more questions.
Sure.
Do you have any Much Music stories, in particular about maybe some of the VJs or things like that? Because you guys would have been like the first, to me, like Much Music band.
Right. So
Pretty Much Music, obviously, but
yeah, so when I mean I owe Much Music a lot because when we did our indie video for I'm an Adult Now, we just cobbled that together. There was no money. My friend who had moved to Toronto to work for the National Film Board, Nello Giran, you know, I obviously when I got here, I connected with him again, and we had done a demo tape in this guy's basement. On a 16-track Fostex, and back then you have a demo tape and you pass it out to clubs to see if you could get gigs, and so we had this demo, and so me and him are listening to the demo and say, hey, you know what would be great is to do a video, and this is like, you know, videos just happening. Much Music was still, you know, early.
it was like still City Limits at that point, or is it?
It was Much Music,
Okay, it was Much
yeah.
Music.
And so I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. That'd be a fun thing. And you know, I used to watch, you know, American feeds of MTV. They have those at bars and stuff like that. And I thought this is amazing. And so anyway, so we thought, what song here would be to make the best video? I was like, maybe that one, that I'm an Adult Now one. You know, it's just total luck, like just it. And so we ended up shooting this video, and I had made friends with this woman. Joni Daniels was her name, and she worked at Much Music, and so I'd made friends with her, and she sort of said, you know, you should go take it down there. And so I did. You could literally walk in the front door of Much Music back then, and I walked. So she may have kind of like greased the wheels, and there was a woman named Morgan who worked there for a long time after that, and she said, she kind of met me at the door, and she said, do you have another copy of this? And I gave her like this gigantic beta tape.
Like a super beta or whatever.
Yeah. And I said, you know, and I said, no. So the first thing she said to me was like, you're crazy. You got to back this stuff up. And I said, what do I know about this? You know. So I gave it to her. And I said, and we were praying that they would play it on City Limits, which is a show now on Much Music.
Yeah.
They played like, it was kind of like the 120 minutes of Much Music. And so like 2 or 3 days later, they called and said, we're going to put this into rotation, like light rotation. And we were like, that is crazy. And so that was kind of the whole start of it. Like that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Did you ever meet Moses Neimer or have any?
No, I never met him. No.
Okay, you're better off. Better that way. It's funny because that song was just so informative to me about, because I would be walking around Queen Street. My dad and I would go down, like we lived in Riverdale, but we go down Queen Street every weekend and just like walk it. And then so I'm seeing the video at home, and I'm like here. I'm like in these places and interacting with it in that way. Was that song informed by hip hop music in any way?
Yes.
Yeah.
I meant to get there when I was talking about all that stuff. So when I started getting into hip hop, I realized like I started trying to rap, and it was terrible. But I remember thinking like you could just talk in a song. And so we actually had a couple of songs where I did that, where I just kind of talk. And I think one of the songs is on that one of those compilations, this song called I Know Some People. And I just kind of talked to it, and I was like, this is a kind of a vibe, like this is cool. And so I think that listening to all that hip hop was the thing that made me kind of figure out I could just talk, and that's what led to the way I dealt with I'm an Adult Now.
I've never connected the two. I always thought The Fall would have been an influence on the Face Crime.
No, we didn't really know them. That was definitely the I'm an Adult Now was definitely probably a product of listening to all that hip hop, the early hip hop.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah. Okay, and I guess the last thing I got to ask you about, what was it like working with Todd Rundgren?
Well, it was great. I mean, Todd is a very unique individual, like, and so some people really loved working with him, and some people don't have enough bad things they could say about him. And but I was such a fan, like I was a huge fan of his, and so when the Pursuit of Happiness got together, we were playing shows, and I remember do you remember the guy B.B. Gabor? Did you ever hear a guy?
Yes,
like
yeah.
Gabor?
Knit Soviet,
Yeah,
Soviet jewelry.
That guy, yeah.
He produced the first. He produced the Curse record.
Oh, okay.
And he did some early punk stuff too.
Yeah. So anyway, I used to go see him play in Edmonton, and I kind of got friendly with him, and just I'd bug him, I guess would be a good word, and so he was working with Todd. And he was doing, and I have an unreleased record. It's a crazy story. That story is crazy.
Wait, an unreleased
B.B. Gabor record? Yeah,
Whoa.
there's an unreleased B.B. Gabor. So he was playing stuff off that, and it was like, it sounded very Todd influenced. He was playing it at his shows. And then I said, I've got this record, a Face Crime record. I said, is there any way you could get it to him? He said, well, I'll listen to it, and if I like it, I'll give it to him. And so anyway, many years. So anyway, but this has relevance later. But so anyway, when we got a record deal with Chrysalis in New York, I think we'd been playing some shows. We were traveling around, and we could play sort of like northern U.S. shows and stuff like that. So we ended up in the office in New York, and we're just talking about the record and what it was going to be. And I was in the office with our Kate Hyman, who was our A&R person, and Mike Bowen, who was the president. They said, "Who'd you like to produce the record?" And I said, "Todd Rundgren." And you say that like, I want to be president of the moon. Like it's just like. And I thought, they'll probably find some junior producer to work with us, and that'll be great. And then we're still on that same kind of tour, I guess, and we're ended up in Winnipeg, and so I'm just there, and someone says, hey, I was sound checking, some guy said, hey, there's a phone call for you, Moe, and so I go at this club and I pick up the phone and say hello. He goes, hey, Moe, it's Todd Rundgren. Like, imagine the person you admire most in the world just cold calling you, and so he called and said, yeah, they sent me your demos, and I'm interested in doing the record, Your guitar player's terrible, and I was like, I'm the guitar player. Oh man, you got to work on it. You got to work. And so that was like that's how it was. And so anyway, so it was great because, we didn't do traditional pre-production where he came into a room with us and we worked on our songs together and stuff. He'd say, just call me up, and so I'd call him and he'd be in his studio in upstate New York, and you say, oh, here's the demos. Tell me. He'd say, okay, this is what you need to change about this, or this one I don't like, to make that better. So he never really said do this. He just said make this better. So that was our pre-production, and so we did that for a while, and then our record company was really like, they loved our live show, because our live show was very different from our recordings. It was very high energy, and that was all from our growing up in the punk world. And so anyway, they said, Todd, you should come. And so he flew to Toronto, and he saw us at what was now the Phoenix, but used to be called the Diamond Club. And so he saw us there, and he goes, "Oh, okay, I get this now." And so that night, we went back to Johnny, our bass player's house, and we stayed up all night. And he had a flight back to California in the morning. And so I got every fan question out of my system, so that when we did the record, it was just like, okay, we're doing a record. I feel like I know this guy. I don't have to talk to him about every little detail. And so it was great. I really got along with him. I thought he was hilarious. He's a brilliant guy, super smart. I thought it was great. We stay up at night talking about politics or whatever, and it was just a great experience.
God damn, you did like the Turn It a Punk with Todd Rundgren, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, it's weird. But last thing here is, we were at his house, and his girlfriend, or who became his wife, made us dinner or something, or I watched a movie and something, and then we were just kind of looking through his records, and I pull out the Face Crime record, and it was there. I think it was still sealed. It was still sealed, and I said, "That's on my old record." And he's like, and then he's kind of opening it up, and then he tries to put it on his turntable, and his turntable doesn't work, and I was like, I don't think he still heard it. So anyway, that's the end of that.
Well, Moe, you got to come back on at some point, because there's a lot more to talk to you about, but this has been awesome. Thank you for doing this.
No, I'm happy to do it. I'm a fan of the podcast, so listen to a lot. So thanks for having me on.